tell me about a liability policy, an umbrella policy. What is it and how does it help us?
Well, an umbrella policy for those people who have even reasonable assets or they're making a good income is going to go over your auto and your home insurance and over your rental properties up to 8 units. And it gives you an additional $1 million up to an additional $5 million of coverage. And for the longest time, liability limits of 100,000 per person, 300,000 per occurrence were deemed as sufficient. Now I am seeing more clients go to 250 and 500,000. However, if you seriously injure a high net worth individual or somebody who's making a substantial income, $250,000 isn't that significant. So an umbrella policy is still only a couple $100 a year for $1 million, $200 to $300 a year for $1 million. And so they, in the case of the auto, would give you $1,250,000 for injury claim, which, let's say you pay $250 a year. I think it's well worth it. Money well spent.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is, my background is as a lawyer. One of the things that I always tell my clients is it's better to be prepared and prevent problems instead of coming back and trying to fix them when the problem is there already. So if you have been, versed in this ahead of time, it's so much better to be preventive, right? So that's a really good point. So now what about for people who are renting? Let's say I have a number of clients who own income properties, and some of them are single family residences, some are duplexes. How much insurance should they be getting?
From a liability standpoint? Well, the way these claims typically work is that, let's say somebody suffers significant injuries. And let's say you have that $1 million umbrella, okay? The $1 million umbrella typically goes over $300,000 of liability coverage. So that gives them a total of $1.3 million, okay? Somebody gets seriously hurt or passes away inside the unit due to, supposed negligence of the landlord, then the insurance company will step up and say, hey, we view this as maximum limits. We're ready to give you a check for $1.3 million right now, but you have to release us of all future claims. Most of the time people will accept that and walk. But if again, you've got somebody who's worth 10, 15, $20 million, then they should probably just go ahead and get a $5 million umbrella, because I'm seeing $5 million umbrellas run around $900 to $1,000 a year. So if they're worth, $5 million, get a $5 million umbrella just to be on the safe side.
So basically get a policy that's sufficient to cover the assets that the person would have. So
that ideally is going to be the best way to approach it. Barring that, though, get at least $1 million umbrella, because again, the adjuster is going to be willing to write them a check for that full amount in the case of a serious liability claim. Most people won't walk away from $1.3 million and sue them in court and go through all of that.
That's true. And there are so many cases that are resolved way before litigation, but still, it's so much better to avoid it altogether.
And it's a feeling of security. I mean, let's face it, you hear of, there's a major liability situation at one of the units you own, and you're sitting with $5 million of liability coverage. You're feeling pretty comfortable that they're not going to try to attack everything that you've got. $5 million in today's market is still a lot.
Okay. And now what I've also seen when I handle my clients' properties is we ask the tenant to also get their own insurance policy. Can you talk a little bit about that and how much should they be getting?
Well, that's a nice thought, but most landlords, especially smaller landlords, don't want to deal with seeing if the policy is renewed, staying in force, and so forth. If you have a property management company, then they're usually more on top of that situation. But as a tenant, I think most tenants don't even realize that they have a liability exposure, because let's say you accidentally cause a grease fire and it does a bunch of smoke damage to the unit. I mean, you can be on the hook for that. And if you say, well, I'm just going to walk away and it's the landlord's problem, guess what? That person who is leasing that unit, not going to have an easy time finding another landlord who will just accept that. And, because it's going to be on their credit report.
Well, and then here's the other thing too. If there is a claim against the tenant, even if the tenant doesn't pay it, and if you have a judgment, that judgment is going to be renewable for 10 years. And then it keeps renewing. So they could do things like attaching wages and things like that. And I'm sure it's certainly something that the tenants don't want to deal with. So what would be a good policy for a tenant to obtain?
Well, first of all, it's super cheap. Like with Mercury on a multi-line basis, so we're handling the auto, we provide renter's insurance policy.
Mhm.
I wrote a renter's insurance policy with $500,000 of liability and 25,000 of contents. And it was $154 for the year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah,
now that's a multi-line client. Understand? That's not a standalone client. But yeah, you can see the premiums like nothing. And so many people reject it, but it's like, I just think it's one of those things where, as you've said before, you have to prepare in advance because you don't know what's going to happen 6 months or a year from now. And then why do you want to take a chance on having a judgment put against you?
I know that's so right. Exactly. So thanks again for joining us. Clara Duran Reed with the Duran Reed firm and Randy Karp with Karp Insurance Services. Have a great day.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you, Randy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.